69%. 69% of marketers say that they're unable to consistently deliver personalized experience, according to Salesforce's 2024 State of Marketing Report. That's almost 7 out of 10 of us that can't figure out how to turn an abundance of customer data into a tailored experience. Here's why. Your customer data is in silos. Your tools need clean and unified data to deliver results. So how can you turn your data chaos into the type of customer experiences your prospects and your customers expect? I'm Benjamin Shapiro, and joining me today is Joyce Gordon, the head of AI at Imperity, which helps unify fragmented customer data to powerful personalized marketing. And Joyce is going to explain how you can combine AI and a unified data foundation to transform your customer experience strategy. Joyce, welcome to the MarTech podcast.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's really great to be here.
Excited to have you on the show. Excited to dig into this combination of data and artificial intelligence and personalization. So before we get into talking about AI and personalization, you're an AI expert, one of the people that actually know how this stuff works. Give me a quick bio on what it means to be an AI expert. Like, what are the skills you have and the experience you had to make you actually an expert in artificial intelligence, not just using ChatGPT?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been working in AI and ML for the last decade. I started my product management career at a really small startup I joined right after the seed round called Castora, which was focused on customer analytics. Helped build the product team there and grew it from seed stage through Imperity's acquisition, which we grew from about 7 to 70 people during that time. And at my time at Imperity, have focused on everything from building a platform for marketers to building our predictive analytics and machine learning project to now AI. I also studied statistics and math in college. So this is a space I've been in and a deep interest I've had for a really long time.
All right. So when we're talking to you, we're not just getting the perspective of somebody that knows how to use ChatGPT and Claude. You actually understand how they work. Explain to me how AI has changed personalization in the past year.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really good question. Browns have been talking about one-to-one personalization forever, basically since the dawn of time. But it's kind of been a dream that's super challenging to realize in the past. And the reason is one of creative constraints. Creative teams are continuously underwater, and there never really was enough creative available to make one-to-one personalization a reality. Generative AI takes the cost of content creation and drives it to zero. So what that means over time is the creative constraints we've faced in the past, they're going to start to lessen. Now, it's not so easy. It's not as if you can take Gen AI, throw it at your data, create one-to-one personalized versions for everyone. There's still a lot of challenges that stand in the way. And so brands are starting to move in the direction of one-to-one personalization, but they're not totally there yet. Where we typically see brands start is with a segmented approach. So in the old world before Gen AI, maybe you had enough creative for 5 different segments when you were launching a campaign. Now, maybe with Gen AI and using AI to create the content, like the imagery, some of the email subject lines, some of the actual copy, maybe you can actually launch a campaign with 20 segments. And what most brands are doing now is they've got a human in the loop. So humans are reviewing the output. They're making sure the AI does things like match the brand voice, is sending the message they want, doesn't have any legal liabilities. So over the past year, we've seen broader segments to more narrow segments. And I think over the next year, we'll see even more of a movement towards one-to-one personalization. So those segments will get smaller and smaller as brands get better at using the models, as they lay their data foundations, as they think about how to introduce Gen AI into the workflow. And then also as they build systems to actually evaluate the Gen AI content at scale, enabling them to figure out where to focus.
Let's talk a little bit about the sort of building the structure, because it seems like that's like the topic of the month right now. I've been reading and trying to research the concept of MCP servers, but it seems like everything we've been doing is human in the loop. I am writing a prompt, I am dropping some data in, I'm analyzing it, and then I'm trying to figure out how to apply that. Now we have this notion of being able to tap into your data sources and have LLMs be able to sort of unify everything and make decisions and then actually take actions. We're sort of getting into the agentic part of the agentic AI era.
Yes.
Am I right? Like, how big is this? MCP servers, help me boil this down.
Yeah. So I guess let's start with what is an MCP server. So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol.
I knew that one.
Well, you're already ahead of the game. This was a standard rolled out by Anthropic. And really what it is, super simply, is it's kind of like an API for agents. It's how different agents talk to one another. So if you've got your customer data on one MCP server, you might want to get that data to your conversational AI agent on your website. Because if you think about conversational AI, for example, if I'm shopping for a dress to wear to my friend's wedding in Hawaii, like you really want that conversational experience to understand what products I've purchased in the past, whether I'm in the loyalty program, what items I'm interested in. So the MCP server is a protocol that makes that data available to other agents, like that conversational agent.
One of the things that in my research, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos basically on like, what is an MCP server? It seems like this is really a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
And the best description that I had is all of these different tools, they can all speak, but they all speak different languages, right? So your Salesforce database speaks English, your Marketo database speaks French, right? And the MCP server is essentially the translator. You feed all of the data into it and it understands all of the language. So then you could have it all combined and read back into a single language. So it is the filtering layer that helps take all of the disparate data and unifies it into kind of a common language that you can then interpret through an LLM.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I absolutely love that description. To your point, Ben, it's a common language where all of your different agents can talk to one another. And I think one thing that's interesting to think about is where things are and how they might evolve. So I would say as we think about conversational AI experiences today, there's a lot of challenges there. Like there was the Air Canada example I think we saw.
Wait, give me the Air Canada example. What happened?
So Air Canada provided a fare to someone. I don't remember the exact details, but I think the AI incorrectly offered a customer a discount that should not have been offered.
All right. Well, at least the door didn't blow off.
Yes, exactly. But there are challenges around like the AI is providing offers or experiences that might not exist. So hallucinations, there are legal challenges. Obviously, there are brand voice challenges. So where we typically see brands start with these conversational AIs is to really constrain the use case. So if you're a ski slope, for example, maybe your AI to start is only going to answer questions about ski school and not what meals you could buy. It's not going to let you book lift tickets. And that's super important because if you've got a constrained use case, it limits the risk and enables you to really deliver a resonant customer experience. And then you can expand beyond that over time.
I interviewed Jordan Crawford, who's a go-to-market specialist, and he's like next level AI guy too. And he always uses the example of, I think it was a car company like Toyota, where you can go on to their like customer service chatbot and then ask it to write a Python script for you and it'll like actually do a pretty good job. And so it's like you need some parameters to be able to deliver these personalized experiences. We can feed real-time data, customer data in theory using an MCP server. Who's doing this well? Who's actually able to create customer experiences that are personalized and tailored? And where are they kind of falling flat?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the brands that are doing this well have kind of constrained the use cases to start. We're all still learning about this technology. It's hard to believe that ChatGPT was launched in November 2022, so we're still very early. I would say the companies that are doing things well today, and many of them are parity customers, are focused primarily on like, how can we move from bigger segments to more micro segments? So you might not even notice as the customer, but you are getting a more customized email based off your loyalty status, your churn status, your price point than you were before. And then we've started to see conversational AI take off when it's focused on a specific use case as opposed to saying we can answer any question for the brand. So the example with the ski slope I mentioned before is like an actual customer. So there's a lot of examples like that out on the market.
Okay, so we've got this notion that artificial intelligence is helping us move from sort of our static. We've got a couple of segments into very micro segments.
Okay.
Eventually, we're going to work our way down into one-to-one personalization. Give me the framework to utilize customer data for that one-to-one AI personalization.
Yeah, that's another really good question. I would say always, so before the framework, I think my overarching feedback probably as a product manager, this is just life philosophy, but always start with the use case. Like if you've got kind of a loyalty chatbot experience, the data you might need and the complexity of that is going to be different than if you are starting with a use case where you have a chatbot that needs to answer anything. So start with the use case. But once you've got the use case, I'll talk through a couple items that are just really helpful from a data perspective. The first is if you have a conversational AI and you really want that AI to be able to answer a lot of questions about your brand, you want it to be able to answer questions about loyalty. You want it to be able to help find a dress to wear to your friend's wedding. You want it to understand how to recommend credit card offers to people so they can sign up for your credit card. It's going to need a lot of data across different sources. And being able to deliver comprehensive experience there really starts with identity. So the first piece is developing an identity spine. So that's how do you know that the same customer shopped online versus in-store versus transacted with your loyalty program.
An identity spine. I've never heard that one before.
That's a little bit of an Amperniism. It's the idea that we can understand who Ben is across all of your different data sources and touch points. And that's so critical for a conversational AI experience, particularly if these experiences seem human-like. Customers' expectations are even higher than if the AI seemed a little bit more robotic. So that's really where to start. The second piece is making sure you've got the right attributes on the customer. So what are the things about Ben that are really going to play a role in curating that experience? And these could be things like your predicted customer lifetime value, what products you'd purchased in the past, even embeddings containing maybe which types of creative you've responded to. So all of that data is going to be really key. And then the last...
Hang on, before you go on, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to ask a question about that.
Yeah.
How much is too much? So if I'm feeding customer data to an LLM and we're giving... Let's take a use case of I'm selling retail. I have a t-shirt company and I'm selling gender, name, location, size, creative they've responded to, maybe even questions they've asked. But I also might be able to map to like pages they've visited, like all sorts of other data and information. When you start giving the more nuanced information to an LLM, is there a sense where you can give too much information and it can't parse what's important as opposed to, like, hey, I'm going to prioritize that this person once visited a women's t-shirt section because I was buying something for my wife. And now all of a sudden it's like he likes men's and women's t-shirts, right? Like, but I'm a man and I want to buy t-shirts that are large or extra large for men primarily.
Yep.
How do you sort of give the context of what information is priority as opposed to just giving everything and letting the LLM decide?
This is a very important point. So if you were to rewind, let's say a year ago, context windows, it's the number of tokens you can pass an LLM. They were much
how much information?
Exactly. Yeah. How much information? More human speak. How much information you could pass the LLM, they were much smaller than they are today. Now they're often millions of tokens you're able to input into a context window.
Hundreds of pages. Go on.
Now, that said, Ben, you're bringing up a really important point. Like, just because you can pass all that information, it might be too much for the LLM to really reason over, and you might start to get some responses that are not as curated as you want. One very core part of agents is this idea of tool calling. So these are different tools the agent has that it's able to access. So let's say that we take your question, and this is something that's we use a lot in Amperity in our AI experience, but let's say that we take a question like, returning to this one, I'm shopping for a dress to wear to my friend's wedding in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
You might feed that question to the LLM and actually ask, hey, what types of data do you think would be helpful here? And then you might actually have a tool call that retrieves that data specifically and passes it to the context. So having as much data as you can, as long as it's high quality, is great. But then you're going to need to have some sort of retrieval step that looks up what are the important pieces of data for that question and probably passes that in. Now, all of this is trial and error. So for some rounds, maybe it's fine to actually pass the full customer profile to the context. But if you're starting to get answers that seem irrelevant, using more of a tool calling or like a RAG-like approach could be really helpful at honing in on the responses you're looking for.
If I ever go through a career change and decide to go down the coaching route, I feel like my ethos and tagline would be make a plan to make a plan. and what you're talking about is akin to that, but for AI, which is you are giving information to have AI write a prompt so AI can execute the prompt with the right information. And I know it sounds a little like circular, but I cannot stress how much, and everything that I've done in building our AI agents, in like the production of our podcasts and our research and our guest sourcing, like it's always, here's a bunch of information, help me write a prompt that I can use to distill this down and execute this task. And then I take the prompt that's returned and run it, and it does a much better job than if I just try to write the prompt myself. And essentially you're saying the same thing, is you can't just feed the raw data in and say give me the answer. It's feed the raw data in and say refine it to figure out what I need, and then you execute based on that sort of middle prompt.
That's exactly right. To take things back to Amperity for one sec, we have a product called Amp AI, where you can ask and answer any questions about all of your customer data, which could be hundreds of tables with hundreds of fields each. It's really complex. And when you ask a question, actually the first thing Amp AI does is it formulates a plan for what are the steps it needs to take to answer that question, and what's the research it needs to do along the way. Like, what are the research queries it needs to get, and what context does it need to load in order to answer your question? So, Ben, that's very similar to the way you're thinking about things.
I did this yesterday. I swear to God, I built one of our first AI agents, or what I'm calling an AI agent, for figuring out who should be on the podcast. And I have this big context document. Here's everything you need to know about the Martech podcast. Here's a second document that's a scoring rubric. So here's how we evaluate our guests. Like, here's the 1 out of 100 point scale. And then here's all the searches you have to do to be able to evaluate and effectively figure out what the scores should be. And then, I take all of that information and I'm like, all right, here's the context of a guest application. Read through the context document, understand the scoring rubric, conduct all these searches, now assign the scores. And it's exactly what you're talking about with Amperity. It's like it needs to think of how to execute the task, what research it has to do before it tries to just go and do it. And so, again, make a plan to make a plan, write a prompt to write a prompt. There's this like repetitive task of refinement and strategy that you and the AI need to do to effectively execute.
That's totally right. Yeah. When I think about success with agents, I really think about 3 things. Number 1, do you have the right underlying data? Number 2, it's all about the tools. So that's like making the plan and making sure the plan has access to the right tools to pull in the right data and also modify the agent's responses. And then the third piece, which we haven't touched on as much, is the evaluation. The evaluation is really, really important. How do you judge on an always-on basis if the agent's responses are good or not good? And more importantly, for the situations where things are not going as well as you'd like, how do you actually root cause what those challenges are? Because that feedback cycle is imperative for taking that information and actually using it to refine the outputs in your approach.
I think that's it. Really important is the AI can learn and has memory. And when it you're executing a prompt, you need to be able to feed back whether it was a successful execution or not, and the AI will start to refine itself. Let me ask you a question, because I've been spending a lot of time, like I said, building our ranking agents and our topic sourcing and things like that, trying to make each of our interviews a personalized experience. It's a ton of work
Yeah.
right now. So what are the ways that you can implement an AI personalized experience without taking on truckloads of dev work?
Mm, that's a really good question. I would say a conversational AI is probably not the place to start, especially if you're new. I would start with something less risky and human in the loop. And you can actually get started really, really quickly here. You need some data, you need an LLM, and you need some people to review the output. Like you can even do it in ChatGPT, you could do it in Databricks. So I would start with a really constrained use case. So maybe, for example, you want to personalize your loyalty welcome email. And for that, you might need to know information on like someone's product preferences, maybe their gender, maybe their age, maybe what their sign up source was. And then you can take that with a couple examples for how you would actually want to personalize the email, pass it to the LLM, and then have the LLM produce the output. And I would say one of my biggest tips are people will often try to use LLMs to personalize, and they're like, this doesn't match our brand voice. It's not what we're looking for. If you can pass like 5 to 10 examples of how you would actually personalize the output based off different pieces of customer data, you'll get far better results than if you just leave it all up to the LLM. Yeah, go ahead.
What matters more? Does it matter more that you give like a tone of voice or some structure and rules for it to try to interpret? Or is it better to give less like, here is our style guide for the chatbot, and more, here's other examples of copy? Is it better to try to define it up front, or just give examples and let it interpret and figure out the style guide?
That's a really good question. This is anecdotal experience. There's no hard and fast rule here. I find that if you've got high quality examples, that's typically the best route. And then typically what I'll do is I'll pass the high quality examples or look at the outputs. And if there are things I don't like about the outputs, I'll say, don't do that. So for example, I was prototyping an AI that would produce personalized emails. And one of the inputs was whether it was a family shopper or whether it was an individual shopper. So whether it was just a person shopping for themselves. And in the personalized email, it would say something like, oh, is your shopping for you and your kids? Here are things you might be interested in. And we all know just because you've bought kids' items in the past, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have children or you're shopping for them. So in addition to the examples, I put in a rule and I said, if you have if you see a family shopper, you can show some kids' items, but don't specifically call out in the copy that they're shopping for their kids. So that iterative approach is really helpful, and it ends up being a mix of examples and then also rules that you're going to hard code into the prompt.
Yeah, whenever I am writing LinkedIn posts, if I give examples to an LLM, it always tends to too closely replicate the examples. So I had this problem where in every LinkedIn post I was using an LLM to help me edit. It always put in the term game changer, because in the 2 of the 5 examples that I had, it was like, this is a total game changer. And so it always put that term, interpreting it as my tone. And I'm like, all right, but it's too formulaic. So I want something that is unique and kind of changed around how we do it. So I've kind of leaned towards, here's rules and style guides with key phrases to use, but don't be too repetitive, instead of giving a ton of examples. It's probably chicken or the egg. You could probably do it both ways.
Yeah, and I think in this example, one thing I may have tried, and there's no hard and fast rule here to your point, I may have gone back and said, use the examples as inspiration, but don't replicate them too closely, and do not use like these following phrases or something like that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So when you're doing personalization, you're basically saying start with human in the loop. You're taking your data, manually uploading it, giving it to an LLM, and having somebody publish it. You're not automating the process first to figure out if it works. Talk to me about when you're putting things into sort of production, how are you taking that manual process and then building a personalized experience that doesn't need a person?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is really the $1 billion question. Most brands are still in the human in the loop phase. If you wanted to move more towards like an always on one-to-one personalized experience, obviously you need to figure out how all of this fits in your workflow. Like you don't want to be uploading creative or email copy or what email subject lines to your tool, and it needs to all flow through. But the really big challenge here is one of evaluations. So you're going to need a system that continuously evaluates the quality of the LLM outputs before it actually goes out in market. And a really common approach here is what's called LLM as a judge. So you actually ask an LLM to review the work of another LLM. And it's up to your brand to really define what the criteria are. So some things I've seen in the past are relevant. So if there are specific pieces of customer data that you want to make sure are definitely used to personalize, does the output actually include those? Some other things are around safety. So is there anything offensive in the output that maybe should be flagged? And then there are also things around offers. Or other pieces of information that can be dynamically added, making sure they're in line with your brand. So the brand needs to sit down and kind of think about what are the key pieces of what are the key checks that they want always to be done on the creative, and then certain creative will probably get flagged for human review to take a look. But as I mentioned, most brands are really moving in this direction, but still using a segmented approach today, just because it's so important to get those evals right, and it's quite a challenge.
We're still using AI to execute manual processes for segmentation and building personalized experience. It's doing the work, and we're the editor and publisher. Give me your forecast for what's the next step. What does the future look like when it comes to these personalized experiences?
That's a really good question, and I'll take it in a slightly different direction relative to our conversation so far. I've seen a couple announcements over the past several months that I think are really interesting. Stripe announced an order intents API where it can purchase on behalf of users. Perplexity and Amazon announced something similar where they're also able to kind of purchase on behalf of users. So I think what this points to is we're going to see more aggregator platforms like the Amazons of the world, the Perplexities, the OpenAIs have their own shopping agents. So instead of going to a brand directly to shop, you might go to one of these agents and say, hey, I'm going skiing at Vail this weekend. Can you help me identify a jacket? And what those shopping agents might do is using MCP or potentially a different approach, we'll have to see. They're going to reach out to different retailers or different brands in general, and they're going to pass some information on the user's context and question and ask for recommendations for that given question. So with that Vail skiing example, they're going to send along information about the user's question, demographics, and try to get recommendations back. And then they'll kind of be the aggregator for what those recommendations are, and the user will be able to purchase actually directly through those experiences. What that means for brands is maintaining the first-party connection is going to become a little more challenging and really important. So there's a couple of things that I think are really important there. Obviously, product quality, differentiation, and brand are important, but also things like making sure you're delivering a fantastic personalized experience on your own website or property, and loyalty are going to be really important for maintaining that first-party relationship as well. So I think we'll see more personalization within the context of brands and their experiences, and also more agentic personalization with aggregators as well.
Yeah, it's funny. My interpretation of what you're saying is your website's not going to matter anymore. And I know that you're saying you have to build a better personalized experience. There will still be the value of brand and probably loyalty programs. And that's how companies will drive sort of first purchase conversions. But it sounds like I'm looking for a ski jacket, rank all the ski jackets for me. Here's the ones that I liked in the past. Ooh, I like this color. No, I don't like that one. You know what? Send me all three. And then you can execute in the LLM to actually conduct the purchase and have the product shipped. So now we don't actually have to go from I did my Google search, I clicked to the link, I'm in the first party website, I place the transaction. And you also don't necessarily have to go on to Amazon to execute, right? So there's this sort of interesting change of like first party data is going to be much harder to come by if everybody is executing their transactions in the LLMs, even if it means there is more volume, more velocity, less friction, less data. It's going to be a brand new world.
It's going to be a brand new world. And an analogy that I think about often is Amazon. I think there's a lot of parallels. So some brands, they basically make their entire business on selling on Amazon, and that works for them. There's some brands that don't sell on Amazon at all. And then there's some brands that do some of their transactions on Amazon, but not all of them. And for the brands in the middle in particular, I think we've all gotten the experience where you get a package in the mail and there's a little piece of paper in the package inviting you to sign up for loyalty or offering you a special offer so they can tie that transaction back to you. I think brands are really going to be focused on ways to maintain that customer relationship in light of this new world.
Joyce, I want to move on to our lightning round where I'm going to ask you a couple of MarTech related questions centered around AI and personalization. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Which team should be responsible for integrating AI into your product?
One thing that's super important is the ideas for how to integrate AI and the use cases should be sourced from your entire company. But I think when it comes down to it, the product and engineering teams are the ones best positioned to actually do the technical work of integrating.
See, it's funny. I think that the business people are actually going to be much more forward in the new development cycles, right? It's the business logic, all of the hurdles for being able to create strategies, do the technical implementation. It seems like everybody can vibe code now, and so you can use plain language text. That sort of communication layer between business and technology is being decreased. So I would assume that it's more the business folks, the marketing team, hopefully, that is going to take responsibility for AI implementation. And then we have the engineers, hopefully, still helping with the plumbing and everything like that. Not to call every engineer a plumber, but aren't the business folks going to be more capable of doing implementation now that we are doing everything in basically spoken language?
I think it depends what we mean by implementation. I think in terms of identifying use cases and testing them out, absolutely. I think business users will be able to do more and more of that. I think setting up the underlying systems and hooking up the LLMs throughout your business and really developing the infrastructure, that will still live with the product and engineering teams.
Okay. Next question. What's better, if your C-suite or your individual contributors know how to use AI?
Don't make me pick both.
Your CEO is going to be so mad at this answer. I can tell where you're going. Hit me with it.
It has to be both.
Oh, that's not an answer.
There's no way that it could be one. I think it's up to the C-suite to make sure that folks at the company have the right tools, that they understand the limitations. So like when they're allowed to use them, when they're not, in terms of things like PII, for example, and also model good behavior. So like, what does it look like to really effectively use AI in your workflow? But people on the ground are the ones that understand their individual use cases, and I think will have the best ideas for how to implement AI for their function. So sorry, Ben, it has to be both. I can't pick.
I'm a total top-down guy. If your executives don't have a grasp on the magnitude of artificial intelligence, and they can't lead the charge for this is how I'm using artificial intelligence to do a better job with our business strategy, with our competitive intelligence, which is going to lead to each functional area leader having more context. Doesn't matter what the individual contributors are. In the same way that if we strip out every LLM that ever existed, what matters more? If your business has the right direction or if you have a bunch of good operators? The good operators can't operate if they don't have the strategy. So congratulations, we've got a bunch of engineers running around coding stuff with no cohesive direction. Does not work. We've already tried this. I think that it has to be a top-down approach, and that's the biggest challenge is, hey, now we're looking at, sorry to stereotype, the gray hairs and saying, you lead the charge with this advanced technology. I think it's really complicated, but I'm a top-down guy.
We'll agree to disagree on this one.
All right. This question is going to be a little bit more in your wheelhouse. What do Imperity identity resolution agents do?
Yeah, so brands have a lot of disparate data. They have online data, offline data, website engagement data, email engagement data. I could go on, and figuring out who a customer is, who Ben is across all of these different touch points, even though you may have used different emails. Maybe you purchased with different addresses. Maybe like me, you changed your last name, so your name is different. Amperity's identity resolution agents look across all of those different data sources and help identify who a single customer is. So you get this really cohesive experience across all the different touch points.
Important question. Did you get married or are you running from the law?
Both, maybe?
Congratulations and good luck. All right, so Imperity agents take all your data silos and they reconcile it to understand identity across all of the different data sources. What's the implementation? Why is this valuable?
Yeah, it's valuable because let's think about where you're transacting with a conversational AI, for example, on the Browns website. If it's going to offer you an offer, for example, it needs to know if you're enrolled in the loyalty program. Like, it's really helpful to understand how you've interacted with the brand's website in the past. Like, what products do you tend to browse, which will inform what you might be interested in. It's helpful to know if you're a member of the credit card program or not. So all of these different touch points together are really what delivers a personalized experience that seems unified. And even to mention online and offline, like being able to stitch together those transactions is super challenging for a lot of brands.
Okay. Last question for you. How has the life of an AI expert changed since the launch of ChatGPT?
Ooh. Well, I've been working in AI for about a decade now, back when it used to be spelled ML. And at that time, I was really, my identity was squarely that of a product person. So I was thinking about what are the best models we could build to really positively impact our customers and their marketing. I would say my focus now is much more almost of a designer. Like, how do we reimagine our entire platform with AI, enable new users to enter our platform who might be on the less technical side, and really rethink the entire user experience?
I feel like you went from, okay, we've got the biggest brain in the room. Let's put them in the corner and have them do math stuff and figure out how to optimize things, to now all of a sudden anybody with artificial intelligence is like put on a pedestal in terms of like, tell me how our entire operation should go. So do you feel like your job is becoming much more the center focus of the company as opposed to like an operational role?
For sure. I would say AI is at the center of Amperity's entire product strategy now. So I'm working across every product and engineering team to really make sure we're delivering an experience that's going to be AI first. So it's much more cross-functional and I would say much more focused on product strategy than previously.
All right, outside of Imperity and your sort of refocusing of the role and the importance of artificial intelligence, when you go to a cocktail party and you tell people that you work in AI instead of machine learning, are they like super interested now?
Yeah, no one, people's eyes used to glaze over when I mentioned I worked in machine learning before, but it turns out everyone wants to chat about AI because everyone has used ChatGPT and most people are blown away by it.
No, I'm excited that the spotlight went more towards your favor and you're handling it all very well.
Nice for a math nerd like myself.
There you go. All right. And that wraps up this episode of the Martech Podcast. Thanks to Joyce Gordon, the head of generative AI at Imperity, for joining us. If you'd like to contact Joyce, you can find a link to her LinkedIn profile in our show notes or visit martechpod.com. You can also visit her company's website, which is imperity.com. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app or over on YouTube, and we'll be back in your feed every week. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.